This is Brad from Argali, and I want to talk to you about how you can use our Kodiak belt to completely shape, sharpen, or hone any knife, broadhead, or hook, as well as how you can use the 3 different sharpening implements in the belt, either independently or together, to get your knife incredibly sharp while you're out in the field. So first, just a review of our Kodiak belt and the different ways you can use it as a knife sharpener. First of all, you've got your vegetable tan leather strap on the side of the belt. You have the tungsten carbide sharpening bar on the top. And then on the back, you have your fine grit diamond grit plate embedded into the back of the buckle. So if I'm in the field and I want to keep my knife really sharp, and I'm assuming if you're using a high quality steel like S35 VN that we use in our knives, really what you're trying to do is just keep that edge razor sharp, and it's fairly easy to do with a little bit of work while you're out there. You can do with the tungsten carbide bar and the leather strap, you can do about 90% of the sharpening you need to do in the field to keep your knife really sharp. The diamond coated plate really comes into play if you've really smashed your edge or you need to reshape your knife edge because you've been using it a bunch. But for the vast majority of the time, you should not be going to the diamond grit plate first. So if I'm out in the field, I'm cutting up an elk, what I would do is get through about half of that elk. If I wanted to keep my knife really sharp, I'd wipe the blood off my knife, take my belt off, or pull it out to a safe distance. That's the other thing. Other thing you got to remember is that be safe when you're sharpening your knife, and lay that leather strap either on your thigh, on a stump, up against a tree, whatever you're comfortable with. And you're going to find the bevel angle of your knife. So this is where practicing beforehand kind of comes in handy. And with a bit of light pressure, at the appropriate bevel angle, you're going to pull your knife across that strap, alternating strokes. And you don't want to put a ton of pressure on this. You don't need to push down really hard. Light to moderate pressure to strap. Now, if you wanted to make this a more effective, you could put some sort of mineral compound in your leather before you go out into the field to give it a little bit of grit and texture, and it just helps do the job a little bit faster and more efficiently. But you don't have to. You'll run your knife along the edge here, and after about 10 or 15 strokes, I would test the knife to see how sharp it is. And really, when you're stropping a knife, it's not sharpening in the traditional sense that a lot of people think of it. Stropping, really what you're doing is imagine that you're bending the tip of your knife back. So if you're using a high quality steel like S35 that we use in our knives, oftentimes when your blade starts to get a little dull in the field, it isn't because you've smashed that edge, it's because you start to get these little micro imperfections, you've rolled your edge or something along those lines. And by stropping, you can actually just sort of bend those imperfections, those burrs out of your sharpening edge and get a lot of that sharpness back in your knife. So that's stropping. That's usually the first place I go to sharpen my knife. But if you're not getting enough of your edge back, or let's say you're cutting up multiple animals and you want to have something a little bit more substantive to your sharpening, then you're going to go to your tungsten carbide bar. Now again, tungsten carbide is an incredibly hard material, so it's harder than your knife steel. So as you move your bevel angle across the edge of this tungsten carbide bar, it will remove some amount of material. Most of the material you're going to remove will not be perceptible to your eye. Imagine it's scraping the bevel angle of your blade. So when you use this, you're going to alternate strokes. You're going to use this just like you would use a ceramic sharpening rod. So you're going to take your knife and you're going to hold the bottom of your buckle, kind of like this, with your thumb angled in this position. Take your bevel angle, and again, make sure to find the appropriate bevel angle. And this is where a little bit of practice can help at home in using the tungsten carbide bar. And you're just going to move your knife across that angle, just like that. And remember, I'm positioning this knife, if this is a 90-degree angle right here, I'm positioning my knife at roughly 45 degrees. It doesn't really matter, but roughly 45 degrees. And if you do the right angle, and you take your knife across that tungsten carbide bar, and again, I'd probably use 10 or 15 strokes, and then I would see how sharp my knife is. And if I'm not happy with the results, it may be that you didn't use the right bevel angle or may just need a few extra strokes, but that should roughly do it. And if I did this, let's say I use a tungsten carbide bar and now my knife is getting sharper, then I would go from the tungsten carbide bar, I would go back to the strop if I wanted to get it even sharper and hone it in even more. Okay, so that's how you use a tungsten carbide bar. Now let's say your knife is really dull, you've cut up, I don't know, a bunch of animals with it, maybe you sawed some wood with it, did some things you shouldn't have, dropped it on a rock, I don't know what happened, let's just say something happened. That's where the diamond coated plate's gonna come in handy. The way you use a diamond coated plate, and this is where the design of our buckle comes in handy. Take your belt off, you're gonna take your webbing, feed it through the front here, and then you're gonna grab the webbing, both sides with one hand, and you're gonna hold it like this. This provides a good little a nice firm purchase to be able to use this diamond coated plate. The other thing this does is these two little lumps right here form a bit of an angle guide. So we use a 20-degree bevel on our blades, and if you lay your knife on top of the webbing there and then down on the diamond plate, it is very close to a 20-degree angle. So what that does is it gives you a little bit of help when you're reshaping your blade at that 20-degree angle. There are a few different ways you can use this diamond coated plate. Some guys would say if you're reshaping your blade, you should just do one side of your knife until you form a burr and then switch it over to the other side. For me in the field, with this 800 grit diamond coated plate, I wouldn't do that. I would alternate strokes until you get a nice even bevel angle again. And the way you do it is rotate sides. Just like that. And you're just gonna rotate sides across there until you get the desired sharpness. Now because you don't have a really long runway here, it might take you a little bit to get that knife edge back to where you want it, but it can and does completely sharpen any knife. Now, any blade. Now, if you end up using the diamond coated plate, my recommendation is once you get done with about 10 to 15 strokes, again on that side, you're gonna come back to the tungsten carbide rod, do the same number of strokes, alternating strokes here, and then you're gonna finish on the leather strop. So that allows you to go from coarse to fine to really fine to get that edge back really sharp. I forgot to mention, if you're sharpening a fishing hook, we have this groove on the back here in the diamond plate. So if you're out fishing and you just want to touch up your hook a bit, all you got to do is unbuckle your belt real quick and then just run your hook through there to get it nice and sharp. Same thing applies for broadheads, same process applies for broadheads. So that is how you use our Kodiak belt to sharpen any knife, broadhead, or fishing hook. If you want to check it out, go to our website at argalioutdoors.com.